In a year that began with Whitney's I Will Always Love You at #1 and ended with Mr. Blobby, Britain's creative musical identity was at an impasse. Grunge had trampled through the country and left as quickly as it arrived, the uncompromising In Utero putting an end to that particular party. And Manchester was still licking its wounds after the Stone Roses' underwhelming return, although two Gallagher brothers had just signed a record deal. The year before had seen the release of two pivotal singles. Pop Scene by Blur was one, all horns, frustration and stutter. The other was The Drowners, Suede's debut single, theatrical, sleazy and sexually ambiguous. It felt like a shot in the arm and was voted Single of the Year by both NME and Melody Maker, who'd even put them on the cover before they'd released a single thing. Those two singles would cement Blur and Suede, along with Oasis and Pulp, as the bands to define and unite not only a nation hungry for defiant and representative music, but an entire cultural movement encompassing comedy, art, film and literature.
It's shite being Scottish!
They wouldn't know it yet, but Brit-pop had just been born. By the time Suede decamped to Kilburn's Master Rock Studios, their debut album was already the most highly anticipated record of an entire generation, with The Independent stating the band had more hype than anybody since the Smiths, possibly even the Sex Pistols. All they had to do was live up to it. I'm Jamie East, and Suede by Suede is today's Virgin Radio Classic Album. Welcome to Virgin Radio's Classic Albums. Brett Anderson, it's an absolute honour. How are you?
I'm very well, Jamie. How are you?
Good. Now, So Young was just on. The pressure. I want to know a bit about the pressure that you guys felt at that time, because the album came out, you were already the biggest band in Britain. People were clamouring to kind of hear what you'd got in store. You know, the record shops had Suede plastic bags, which was like an amazing marketing feat back in '93.
Yes.
And speaking as a kind of young lad in Derby, it was an event. It was the first kind of musical event I kind of remember. How did it feel being in the eye of the storm?
I felt incredibly exciting, to be honest. It was. I think it's exciting for any band when you go from you're on that cusp of success, you know. But for Suede, it felt like there was another element there. I don't really know what that other element was, but it felt like that we were on a watershed, really. I think. I don't think there'd been a band like us for a while. For many years, I think we were the first band for many years that were trying to write the sort of songs that we were trying to write. We were trying to write songs about real life, about real. I don't know, just to try and do something with a little bit of drama and a little bit of style, but for it to be very realistic. I think
there was a lot of theatre there, wasn't there?
Yeah.
And maybe that was. I mean, unbeknownst to you guys, you know, you were kind of you were birthing Brit-pop.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's probably what you know. Lots of the press were getting very excited about, because they could see something that was, I don't know, going against the grain, really. And yeah, it was the first record of that genre, I suppose. Yeah. Yeah,
I mean, going back to, I think maybe the year before, so Pop Scene had come out, I think, and The Drowners had come out, and they were kind of like these two kind of flagpoles in the charts, or certainly the indie charts at the time. But you'd been on the cover of NME without ever having a proper release.
Yeah.
I mean, nowadays that just sounds absolutely crackers.
Yeah.
How did that feel?
Well,
was it part of the plan? Was it?
Yeah, I mean, at the time it was just a kind of crazy thing that happened. It was actually the cover of the Melody Maker.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, but it's Melody Maker long gone. It was just one of those things that happened, and we just grabbed it, you know. And I think looking back on it, it was probably not very good for the band. We got probably too much exposure too early on, and I think a lot of people were quite suspicious of us because of that. But all we were doing, what can you do when you're a band? You know, the alternative is to stand in a dole queue, and you know that's where we come from. We come from dole queues and dead end jobs, and you know, universities and stuff like that.
So to get to this point. What had gone on before then? So how long had you been together? There were kind of various kind of
we've been together for years. Yeah, we've been together for a long time. I mean, this is the thing. It sort of seemed like Suede was an overnight success, but it was the longest overnight success in musical history. I mean, we regularly used to play to more people. There would regularly be more people on stage than in the audience.
Yeah.
We once played to one person. You know, it was a pub called the Amersham Arms, and there was one person in the audience. We're like, You know, so basically it was a long, very, very painful birth.
Yeah.
And I think, looking back on it, it was a great thing, because what it meant was that the music industry completely ignored us and allowed us just to sort of get on with our own thing and develop our own style. And if we'd have been any better, which we weren't, we would have probably sort of like tried to ape the kind of current fashionable bands who were the kind of shoegazing bands or the
So what was going on at the time? So it's kind of a slow dive kind of era.
Yeah, it was that kind of era, but it's just coming out of the sort of, you know, the indie dance sort of era. The baggy. You know, yeah, the baggy thing. It was that kind of whole mess of music, and we weren't good enough to really ape those bands even. So we sort of developed our own thing, and we became this band, and I don't know, whatever it is, there it is. It's Suede sort of thing, and a lot of the reason that we became ourselves was because we couldn't really become anyone else.
And I guess what it allowed you to do, it gave you a luxury of time, so that when the time came, you were armed and ready.
Exactly. So we just wrote a lot. You know, we spent a lot of time writing together and sort of fine tuning it and kind of like plotting and planning and all of these sorts of things. So when we first came on the scene, we sort of exploded on the scene, I suppose, for want of a better word. It felt like we were quite fully formed, and you know, we were kind of like, you know, we had a sort of manifesto as a band, I suppose, you know, in lots of ways.
Okay, we're going to take a look at one of the breakthrough singles off the album, which was Animal Nitrate.
Yeah.
Now, the swagger and the kind of Animal Nitrate is a great example of kind of the style that you created for yourselves, really, because you came. A lot of people compared you to Bowie or even kind of a bit of the Smiths as well, but it doesn't really tell the whole story.
No, I think those are just sort of like two kind of like obvious reference points. But there's obvious, with any band, there's a million reference points sort of in between those points. I think they were just the kind of like the lazy journalist reference points. Yeah, I think we quite quickly sort of became sort of quite a kind of, we were just ourselves. We were just sort of Suede. The Suede identity was formed quite early on. You know, it was a lot to do with poverty. It was a lot to do with failure. All of these things. There was a sort of like a kind of like a low rent kind of almost like political subtext to lots of the songs. Yeah.
And the songwriting process, was it generally like you and Bernard? Kind of,
yeah,
did you come separately with an idea, or was it literally sat around a guitar or a piano and knocking one out?
No, it's quite specific where we wrote. Bernard would write a piece of music and sort of present it to me, and I'd go away and write melodies and words, sort of thing. It was quite a specific way we used to write. It was quite formulaic. I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just like that's the way we wrote. Obviously, there's a couple of anomalies, but that was the general formula.
Was it tricky putting words to music? 'Cause I've always, you know, Elton. I mean, the classic example is Elton and Bernie doing that. So where Elton would come up with these kind of melodies and send them off, and Bernie would kind of. Yeah. I guess in my mind, it seems like quite a shoehorn to fit your ideas into that melody.
It can feel like that, yeah. But it kind of, you know, before I really learnt to do it properly, it just didn't work, and it was like I was just putting words on top of guitar parts, and that didn't work. But suddenly, as writers, the door, you find the key to the door, and you can kind of unlock it and walk through into this. You know, you suddenly realise how to do it, and I was. It's quite a hard thing to do, but there's something to be said for that struggle. You know, that kind of like the fact that it's quite a tricky thing to do means that you go to interesting places as a writer that you wouldn't normally go to. If I'm just sort of sitting at the piano, just banging through simple chords, it's too safe.
Yeah.
The fact that Bernard was writing these kind of quite gnarly, strange guitar parts.
Well, the chorus of Animal Nitrate is a classic example.
Yeah, with odd chord changes and things like that. It forced me to write interesting, unusual melodies, and when it worked really well. You know.
And in terms of the lyrical content, you know, you can't do a straightforward love song over.
No,
over
exactly,
kind of music.
and we never did. So
I guess that kind of steered everything towards what you were saying lyrically.
Yes, exactly.
Did you ever kind of think, right, this one, I need to write a song and it needs to say this, or were you generally letting it wash over you? And then, you know, there's a lot of songwriters they start off doing all the vowel sounds and the umming and the ahhing and getting the melody and the top line right, and then seeing what words fit? Or did you have a very clear distinction of like, right, this is going to be about sex, or this is going to be about...
As Oscar Wilde said, everything in the world is about sex, except sex, which is about power, which is one of my favourite quotes. Yeah, of course. There are themes that always come through, but I didn't write so kind of consciously like that. I used to, well, I still do. I have like a notebook of just like little half ideas, mainly titles actually, and little phrases, and that's where something like Animal Nitrate came from. It was like something I misheard actually at the back room of a gig one night. I heard something, I went off to the loo and wrote it down, and the next day I was writing, and I kind of opened my thing, oh, that's interesting. And it sort of suggests this train of thought, so that's often how I do it, and I just sort of follow this train of thought. But I think there's always themes,
Yeah.
There's lots of themes on this, there's lots of themes on this album, lots of, I mean, I wanted to write about sex, because I think, sex is kind of, it's inescapable, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I didn't want to write about it in a kind of cartoon way. I always found that sex in pop music was written about either in a very kind of cartoon way, love in an elevator or something like that, or it was ignored. And so it was kind of like treated as sort of prissy, and it was kind of like in a very sort of like
Yeah, a lot of pop singers were Barbie dolls back in the day.
Yeah, exactly. And I sort of wanted to write about, or kind of not write about, but sort of just have a feeling of real lives, and that was I wanted to write about sex as a real thing, and I wanted to write about life as a real thing, and I just happened to be British and living and poor and white, and so those were the sort of things that kind of it wasn't like sort of like I had this manifesto. It was like that was just who I was, and that's the world that I reflected around me, sort of thing. And I think I wasn't celebrating Britain, I was documenting it, and that's the big difference. And we mentioned Brit-pop earlier, and I think that's the big difference between what Suede were doing and what the bands that came after Suede were doing. They were celebrating a concept of nationhood, and I was just sort of documenting being a kind of poor, unemployed bloke sitting in a rented room somewhere.
Well, yeah, I mean, the video for Animal Nitrate you can hardly call celebratory of Britain, can you? Because it looks grim.
No, it's grim, but life is grim. It's it was supposed to be a reflection of that. It certainly was a long way away from the sort of flag-waving, jingoistic thing that Britpop became.
Yeah, and at the time, I don't know what you're like now, but at the time you were kind of a master at, intentionally or unintentionally, of making people, and not in a way that we'd seen since probably Morrissey, of making people really study the lyrics and the lyrical content. Over 21 in the chorus and all that. That was you had a bit of cheek to you as well. You knew exactly what you were doing.
Yeah,
right?
I was kind of playing with imagery and sort of flirting with lots of imagery in lots of ways. But that's what pop music does. Pop music is there to provoke.
But it felt like a proper shot to the arm.
Yeah,
at the time.
I think it's all part of the magic of pop music. It's supposed to nag, and it's supposed to provoke, and it's supposed to annoy people. Or good pop music is anyway, I think. And that's what I was trying to do.
We're going to take a listen to the first single off the album, which is The Drowners, which was your first single. So let's have a grab a listen to that.
Okay. Bizarrely enough, my wife almost appeared in this video. She went for a casting. She'd sold me recently. She almost got the role as that woman.
Oh wow!
She didn't, but
take me through.
Thank God for that.
Take me through. So, apart from the writing process, what was it like being in the studio for Suede at that time? Were you kind of clued up as to how it kind of worked by that time? She'd done so many demos. On the remastered version of this album, there are kind of a whole plethora of demos, which I urge everybody to go and check out because they're amazing. That you've done for quite a few different record companies as well.
Yeah, yeah.
So by the time you got to do this, presumably you knew what you were doing.
Yeah, I think we did. Yeah, we'd kind of recorded a few of the songs a few times, and I think we were just ready for it. We kind of like felt as though we had a really good sort of collection of songs, and it was a very exciting record to make. It did feel like we were it wasn't just another record being made. It felt like it had some sort of, it felt like as a band we had a real purpose, actually. It felt like we were doing something very fresh and very new, the kind of like the sense of Englishness, the kind of like the documentation of real life, all these kind of things. It did feel like we had the wind in ourselves, and it's a very, very exciting time. I remember, you know, we were going up to the studio, jumping on the bus up to the studio, and just like every day, just thinking, God, we're doing something really exciting here.
And take me through the recording of something like The Drowners. How would it work? So you'd have the song, you'd have demoed it. You know, you've got your producer on board. Do you do it did you do it in the traditional sense of kind of drums in the room first, and then the bass player would walk in, then the guitarist?
Yeah, we did it. We just did overdubs, and we didn't even really. I don't even. It's a long time ago. You're asking. I don't even really remember playing. All of us playing the same song in the room. I think we just sort of set a click track up, and Simon would just sort of play the drum track. You know?
Well, that's the beauty of the band's first album, isn't it? Because they're the songs that you've grown up with and got signed by.
Yeah, and you know it so well.
You know, and you've played them to death already.
Yeah,
so
exactly. You know them so well. Yeah, but it's just it's about sort of translating that live energy onto record. And I think that, you know, if there's one criticism of the album, is that I don't think it quite does that. I think that the band were a very, very exciting live band at the time. And I think the album is tamer than you know, if I was to go back and re-record it, which obviously I'm not going to because no one really cares except me. I'd do it in a much more kind of live way. I'd get the band and baffle it up, you know, baffle everyone off and play. You know,
have you
like
gone on to record like that?
Yeah, I mean that's how we tend to record now, sort of thing. But you learn how to do these things. You know, you learn how to unlearn these things in a funny sort of way, don't you?
Yeah, you do. And did you find some bands prefer live and some bands prefer recording? Which do you prefer? Because recording can be quite a laborious and horrific process for some people.
But there's something about recording, isn't there? There's something. I love the sense that, you know, you're leaving something for the generations. You know, if you get it right, that sense that, you know, it's within your grasp to sort of achieve some sort of life beyond your own life.
It's a legacy, isn't it?
Yeah, and there's something amazing about that. So there's the excitement of doing something in the studio that really clicks. That's really, really exciting. It's a different sort of energy. Playing live can be such an amazing thrill and a very visceral thing. You know, I completely understand why bands like the Rolling Stones carry on playing, because it's a drug, it's an energy that you simply can't get from anywhere else.
And how was it when you did the Royal Albert Hall a couple of years ago? That was, and the O2 as well.
Well, that was amazing. Yeah, I mean the Albert Hall especially was the comeback show we did in 2010, which is 8 years ago now.
Back to you another one.
Nearly a decade ago. It's a bit worrying, isn't it? Yeah, I mean that was amazing. That show. You know, we hadn't played for, I think we split up for sort of 7 years or something like that, and it felt, coming back that night, felt incredibly special, and the kind of love that was in the room was really amazing, because we sort of went away and we sort of split up in a weird. We split up when on our weakest album. That's the reason we split up, because it felt like we've run out of ideas, and I think because of that, when we split up, the band weren't particularly mourned. Right. And I didn't really know kind of what the reaction people would have when we came back. I thought maybe people would be indifferent.
But a lot of that's to do with the legacy of this album.
Exactly, and the legacy of this album and the next two albums as well. But you know, it was a wonderful night, and I remember playing Metal Mickey that night, and it being just there was a sort of standing ovation after we played Metal Mickey, and the whole of the Albert Hall was just alive. It was a beautiful night.
You're a professional, Brett. You just segued neatly into Metal Mickey. Let's take a listen.
And those videos they just look so cheap. It's hilarious.
But they didn't feel it at the time.
No, I know. I think they were very cheap, but I kind of quite like them in a way. There's something kind of quite sort of homemade about them. Yeah. You know, they're not going to win any awards, but there's something quite nice about it. You know. So
take me through Metal Mickey as a song, like, you know, the imagery of the video. You've got a lot of Quentin Crisp going on there. And I guess from a young music fan, I remember listening to it thinking, it took me ages because there was no internet then, and lyrics were quite hard to kind of decipher or find out at the time. So when I finally found out the chorus, "She Sells Heart," I was just like, what the bloody hell, what's he on about?
Yeah.
Is it really about a girl that works in the butcher's?
Well, it can be if that's what you want it to be.
That's what I mean.
About.
Do you like to?
Yeah, I do, absolutely. I like it. There's certain songs that mean something very specifically, and there's certain songs that I think the power of them is that they're oblique, you know, and something like Metal Mickey is quite oblique, you know, it's just about, I don't know, sort of love and sex and
Atomic Thunderbusters.
Atomic Thunder, that's exactly what it's about, Atomic Thunderbusters. But, do you know what I mean? That's the power of pop music. And I've always been fascinated by that, about how, you know, pop music has got a kind of like, it's more than the sum of its parts. You know, there's that sort of popular thing of like taking pop lyrics away from the song and laughing at them because they're very simplistic. Baby, baby, yeah, yeah. What does that mean? It's nonsense. But when you hear it in context, pop music, the lyric, it only works with the melody, and because of that, the melody is everything. And the context is
Phil
everything.
Spector was the king of that.
Exactly. You know, the meaningless lyrics, but what incredibly moving pop songs they are.
Yeah.
And I'm not comparing Metal Mickey to that or anything like that, but it's a similar sort of thing. It's quite a throwaway lyric.
Yeah.
It's not my most kind of cerebral lyric at all, but it kind of works. There's something quite primal about it, especially the guitar part, you know, that ding, 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 ding thing. Which
and where's I mean, glam's quite a heavy influence on.
Well, that was, funnily enough, that was actually, it wasn't inspired by glam, that was inspired by the Shoop Shoop song by Cher, apparently.
Wow.
According to Bernard. Yeah, Bernard told me that once, which is brilliant, you know.
I mean,
what a great influence that is.
Well, at the time, let's talk about a bit about the music of the time, because we were saying earlier that, you know, it's the year started with Whitney Houston, I Will Always Love You at #1, and ended with Mr. Blobby at #1, and you guys were kind of slap bang in the middle of that.
We're a direct kind of like hybrid of Mr. Blobby and Whitney Houston now.
And discos were, or discos or clubs of the time. You know, it was back in the day when an indie disco was a local phenomenon. Every town had an indie disco.
Yeah.
And it was you guys were one of the first new bands to be played in those indie discos, because there'd been nothing. You know, you'd had Step On by the Happy Mondays, maybe I Am the Resurrection.
Yeah.
And then there's just this chasm and gap until something like the Drowners or Metal Mickey came along, which was just like, oh my God, I can dance to this, and it's making my hips do something that Shaun Ryder didn't really make me feel, you know. So it kind of like...
That's what we want to see, Shaun Ryder dancing to Metal Mickey. Tell me that.
And you know what? He would do that for a tenner.
It would be good, yeah.
Let's move on to another track. I think this is probably my favourite off the whole album, Pantomime Horse. I absolutely love it.
Well, you've got good taste. It's probably my favourite as well.
Oh, great. I was going to ask you that as well.
Yeah.
Tell me, before we go to it, because there's no official video of Pantomime Horse that we
No,
can
it wasn't
find.
a single, no.
But this is from an Albert Hall gig that you did at the time, which, a little confession, certainly for bands from Derby in the time that were trying to be good at playing live. There was one copy of the concert on VHS that local bands would pass around,
right,
as a reference point to how to play live.
Right.
That was so.
Wow.
I mean, you were not responsible for any hit makers by any stretch of the imagination.
But
you certainly gave us a lot of food for thought.
Well, yeah.
Playing live just seemed to kind of come really naturally. I remember watching you do Animal Nitrate at the Brits, and the old kind of Mike slapping the arse kind of stuff.
Yeah.
All of that, and like seeing the shocked. I think at the time Tory MPs were invited to the Brits.
That was hilarious. Yeah, I mean, when you look back at that little clip now, it's actually, there's something very strange and a bit dangerous about it. You know, I just remember it at the time it being utterly ridiculous. You know, it's just a sea of kind of like people in suits and us kind of like, you know, wandering on in our kind of like, you know, jeans with holes in them and our kind of unwashed hair, and banging out this song like we were in the Camden Falcons sort of thing. You know, it was a clash of worlds, but it's very exciting. And I think that it was almost like there was something about that summed up our uncomfortable sort of relationship with the music business itself, actually.
But there was a whole generation of kids watching that going, go on. Son.
Yes, I think they were. I think it was really exciting. I remember when I saw it and thought, oh yeah, that's exciting. Because it was, you know, the Brits was previously very, very conservative. Yeah. You know, it was like, you know, it was I
think Tom Jones playing the same
these were
Brits,
the sort of Sam Fox years, you know, when it was a different sort of thing to what it is now, you know.
Right, let's take a listen to one of my favourites, Pantomime Horse. Can you talk to me about that song a bit? Because it means, like you say, it means a lot. Songs mean different things to different people, and I don't really know what it means to me, but it means a lot. On a very raw emotional level to listen to. I find it incredibly soothing and also mysterious and also a little bit dangerous.
Yeah, it's got a lot of sort of like tonal shifts, hasn't it? It kind of like it sort of starts off. You're right. There's a soothingness to it, the way it sort of lilts and ebbs in, and then by the end of it, you realise you're kind of like, this kind of nice little boat that you're floating down the river on is just about to head towards
a
waterfall, and you're going to be smashed, and your skull's going to be crushed on the rocks. So it kind of takes you somewhere rather unpleasant, which all songs should, I think. It's I don't know. It's quite a sort of it's a song about frustration and sort of sexual frustration, and it's quite a dark sentiment at the end, I think. But there's an undertone with it. It's about class and privilege and all those things as well.
There's one great line in it that you can either explain or not. And I might even have got it wrong. Lonely as the son of Superman. Have I got that right?
Tragic as the son of Superman.
Tragic as the son of Superman.
Yeah.
Which I mean, it says nothing, but says absolutely everything.
Yeah, I like that one. Yeah, I guess I was just sort of thinking of kind of these sort of poor sort of people that are kind of the offspring of very successful people. How they, how hard it is for them to follow in those footsteps. How they're always going to be in those shadows. So, yeah, tragic as the son of. I like that line as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, thank you. But it's still one of my favourite Suede songs, Pantomime Horse. It's still. We still play. We often open with it. Actually, it's a really good opener. It's a great way to start a gig, because it just, like I said, the way it changes from the start to the end is a huge shift, and it's quite an exciting way to open a gig.
I mean, influences for the kind of the more kind of bombastic Suede songs, probably a bit more. People can kind of grab the tendons of those a bit more, but what are the influences for you kind of more ethereal kind of moments?
For the things like this?
I mean, because you're painting a kind of soundscape really, and almost like I'm trying to think of an example. They're like reading a book, listening to songs like Pantomime Horse and The Next Life, for instance, or She's Not Dead. It's like reading a book.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of musical depth, isn't there? I mean, things like Sleeping Pills as well. I mean, they're very sort of lush, and I suppose lots of classic 70s rock. And I think Pantomime Horse was sort of influenced a bit by Smith's song "That Joke Isn't Funny Anymore." That's where we got the time signature from, the 6/8 waltz time. But yeah, it's a beautiful piece of music. I love the introduction, the kind of like this sort of almost sort of Eastern drifting, ebbing guitar part before the rhythm section comes in. And
there's a great moment when you play it live in that particular video. And for those watching this on video, go and seek it out. Both you and Bernard get completely lost in the Suede. There's that guitar arpeggio that kind of kicks in towards the end, and it sends you on a bit of a bit of a rowing boat.
And the outro section, the coda is always really, really exciting. It's always a real moment when I kind of go right up an octave at the end. It's sort of like it's a moment that I can always tell the audience is sort of waiting for.
It's the explosion. The lighting engineer's waiting.
Yeah, exactly. Come on.
What was it like? What was it like recording? Can you remember recording any of the vocals in the studio? How do you get yourself in the mood in the studio? Because it's quite difficult.
Yeah, I used to do a lot of sort of warm-up exercises just to sort of kind of literally get my voice. It's a sort of strange muscle, the voice. It's got to be warmed up. You can't just start. The kind of there's lots of big range leaps and stuff like that in the kind of songs that I write. Yeah, I don't know really. No sort of special thing. I didn't used to take my clothes off or anything like that. No, just I don't know. Just sort of. I think songs have a kind of you inhabit them, and a good song is almost like comes with its own narrative and comes with its own sort of like, you don't need the motivation. You know, you don't need someone telling you how to approach it, because it's sort of, it's written there for you, you know. So no, I didn't have any special sort of like unusual processes of how I'd sing it. I just sort of go in there and sing and try and live the song.
We're gonna finish this part of the interview with the closer of the album, which is The Next Life. So let's grab a listen to that. Every great album has a great closer. You know, how important was the track listing of the album?
Really important. I've always been sort of slightly obsessed with track listings and how it can, you know, how it can change your perception of a record. You know, how you drag the listener through different moods and stuff. I mean, if I was to kind of rearrange this album, I probably wouldn't have it as it's very sort of stop-starty. You got Moving and then Pantomime Horse and then Drown. It's kind of up and down, up and down. I'd probably have more patches where there'd be kind of like slower songs grouped together. Yeah. But yeah, The Next Life was always going to be the closing song. Me and Bernard were looking for a while to specifically write something that had a different kind of feel to the rest of the album. We wanted to have almost like the sense that the listener could catch their breath. There's an album by Neil Young, After the Gold Rush, and the last song on After the Gold Rush it's just this sort of little sort of piano-y ditty, and it takes the listener somewhere else, and that's what we wanted to do with this record, with The Next Life. And it's one of my favourite songs on the album. It's just a sort of a very, almost like a, there's something very sort of understated about it. It's just almost like a child's piano exercise. It's just, there's something so sort of simple and
annoyingly very difficult to play on the piano as well if you're not Bernard Butler.
Yeah, I mean, this is it's a beautiful thing, because this is when Bernard was sort of still learning to play the piano, and you can kind of tell there's a kind of hesitancy to it. There's a sort of a really lovely naivety to it, which I think when you become more adept as a musician, you kind of lose. And I think there was that point where, when you're learning to play the piano, that there's a bit of a magic there. And I think it was inspired by Moonlight Sonata by Beethoven.
Oh, okay. I suppose the kind of waltzy arpeggio of it all.
And it was his sort of version of that, you know.
So the album's done. What were you doing on release day? What was it like? Can you remember the day it came out?
I remember the day it went to #1, because I remember we were in I think it was in a hotel in Leeds, and I remember banging on Simon's door, Simon the drummer, and telling him that our album had gone to #1, and he was kind of washing his underpants in a sink. And it was this brilliant sort of like, you know, this sort of juxtaposition of kind of like, you know,
the biggest band
glamour
in the country,
and kind of like, you know, you know, mundanity sort of thing. So I always remember that moment. It's funny.
And presumably it must have felt like from that day onwards everything kind of changed.
Yeah, I mean, I think it wasn't just that. I think things had been changing for quite a while. I think from sort of September '92, when Metal Mickey came out, it's suddenly we were sort of, Metal Mickey wasn't a hit like Animal Nitrate, but the whole of '93 was a pretty crazy ride, actually. Yeah. So
take me through, just taking a step back. So you finished the mixing, it's been mastered, and the first time that you all sit down and listen to it, the completed album, you must have known what you had on your hands. Did you have that confidence of kind of going, this is bloody brilliant?
Yeah, I think we did. I think we were pretty excited about it, actually. Yeah. You know, I think, and it feels like quite a confident record. I think it feels like a real statement. It feels like it's sort of bristling with arrogance.
Yeah.
But you know, I don't make any sort of.
It was okay to be arrogant if you've got the stuff to back it up with.
Yeah, it's an arrogant record, but it's got moments of calm and moments of beauty as well. It's not a one-dimensional record, I don't think. I think it's got some depth and there's melancholy as well. But I think it is a very confident record. Yeah.
We're going to do this thing now called The One. If that's right. It's just a couple of questions all based around one thing.
Okay.
So
that sounds confusing.
It's very, very simple. So Brett, what's the one track that you still to this day love listening to off the album?
Pantomime Horse,
Yeah.
I suppose. That's the one song that
That's the one you go back to.
Yeah, there's a magic to it, yeah.
Can you think of one high point throughout the recording of it?
One high point?
Yeah. Is there a memory that kind of sticks in your mind?
I think when we wrote So Young, that was a really exciting point. I remember being in the studio when Ed Buller put the piano solo in the middle eight, and suddenly it felt like a different song. It felt like the band. It felt like we were suggesting different things, new things about the band. It felt like it suggested where we could go as a band. It took it beyond just the guitar, bass, and drums format, and that was a really exciting moment.
What about a low point? Can you remember any particular point where you'd kind of bang your head against the door?
Right, trying to write Animal Nitrate for ages. I think Bernard gave me the music to it, 3 or 4 months before I managed to write anything to it. And so I remember being in rehearsals, and the band would be running through it, and they'd be going, "Come on, have you got anything for this?" And I'd be sort of sitting there like this, "Sorry, I haven't got anything for it." So that was quite a frustrating thing. But I didn't just want to.
Was it writer's block, or were you just kind of still trying to find?
It was just one of those things that I knew the music was really good, and I didn't want to just write anything to it. I wanted to find the mot juste, as they say, the kind of like just the right thing for it. And I left it for a while, and I came back to it. And sometimes that's the best way to do it. Sometimes your subconscious is working on these things when you're not thinking about it, when you're doing the washing up.
Have you ever had writer's block?
Yes and no. I mean, I don't sort of call it writer's block. I just sort of say to myself, well, let's just go and do something else for a while. Yeah. Okay. I think as soon as you start you define it like that or become obsessed with it, that becomes that's really unhelpful.
What's the one sore thumb? Is there a sore thumb on the album?
Yes, there is.
Okay.
There's a
Tell me about
sticks
that.
out like a sore thumb. I think Animal Lover.
Okay.
The song Animal Lover is my least favourite song on the album. I think it's the weakest song by a long way. I don't really know how it made it onto the record. It was a sort of moment of weakness where it would have been the album would have been much stronger if we'd have put virtually any of the B-sides from those first.
Like
few
Rocking
singles.
Horse or something like that, maybe.
Some things like My Insatiable One or something like that would have been, To the Birds or something like that.
You're one of the first bands. I mean, obviously. Noel Gallagher gets a lot of accolades for his kind of B-sides and kind of like the kind of like confidence of chucking kind of Acquiesce on a B-side, which is a great song. But you guys had done the same thing. To your kind of avid fans, they were almost more keen to hear something like To the Birds and My Insatiable One as they were the singles.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think that's something that we were always very, very keen to do in those early days. And I think when B-sides actually meant something, which they don't anymore. Anyone who's watching this that was born after...
Dad, what's a B-side?
Was born after in the millennium is like, what's a B-side? And for anyone that doesn't know, they were the other side of a single. And it did really matter to us. It mattered to us that we gave the fans, we honoured their devotion with a gift. And bands that I'd liked in the past had always had great B-sides. There's some amazing B-sides throughout the history of British rock music. That
if you could put one other person's song on the album, what would it be?
One other person's song?
Well, if is there another song that you think could slot into that?
Well, I was listening to a lot of Robert Wyatt at the time. Actually, there's a song called "Sea Song" on his album Rock Bottom, which I really loved, and I was listening to a lot at the time. So maybe that could slip in there somewhere. It's feels a bit like some of the slower songs on the album.
Brett, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. What a joy to talk about such a bloody great record.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for all the joy you brought me and all the listeners as well. And long may that continue. Brett Anderson from Suede, thanks for coming on Virgin Radio Classic Albums.
It's been a pleasure. Cheers.
It's all about the music. Virgin Radio.